After being the 6th longest wait from announcement to release for a first-party Nintendo Switch game, check out this video for context behind that once you're done with this one, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has finally graced this little machine, and I could not be happier. As a dad with a busy schedule, I'm recently fighting to get the energy to play games I want to play and enjoy, but this game has squeezed itself into my life like no other has since Breath of the Wild itself. So here I am, nowhere near done with this game, but nevertheless wondering, with Tears of the Kingdom now out, what's next for Boy Zelda? What even could be next for Girl Link? Let's talk about it. Of course, there will be no story spoilers for this game because I've largely been putzing around the world and barely have done any of the story stuff myself yet, so I have no clue where it goes beyond the basic premise and mostly story bits that I'd inferred from pre-release material. So what I'm saying is that today we're going to tackle what all could be next for the Zelda series, but none of this will be story or lore based. I'm just interested in seeing where the franchise goes after Tears of the Kingdom. I'll give basically any ideas I can think of, even if I think they're not likely, and say how good or bad that sounds, as well as how likely. But I'm just as, if not more, interested in how likely you think they are and how much you'd enjoy each one, so let me know in the comments. Getting the easy one out of the way, Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD. I'm not going to harp on this one very long, because it's been talked to death, but there is one new wrinkle since Tears of the Kingdom's release that I haven't heard people mention yet. There's been endless consideration of whether this would be one full-priced game or two not full-priced games. On the Wii U, where the remasters of these two GameCube games released, they were each a full-priced game, although that was $50 at the time. More recently, Skyward Sword HD released on the Switch also as a full-price title, so there's some logic that suggests Nintendo would release them as separate games again for similar reasons. On the other hand, it could be that it's harder to argue for a full price for remasters of older games the second time around without further adding content. So what does Nintendo do? And this is where Tears of the Kingdom comes in. While a full price $60 may be somewhat devaluing these two illustrious titles together, but a full $50 or $60 each may be too aggressive, Tears of the Kingdom released at $70. And maybe that's the right price for this package. And I'd suspect they do a situation like they've done with some dual packs in the past, where you buy one digitally for $40 and the other costs the $30 difference to the $70 price tag or whatever. All that to say, details aside, Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD, in my opinion, are absolutely happening. Like with Metroid Prime Remaster, it's just a question of when they decide to do it more than anything else. And of course, I'd love this. They should absolutely do it. Alright, there it is. First one done. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Let's keep going. Honestly, beyond that, there's just about nothing set in stone. So while some speculation will be more grounded, anything's on the table. So to switch things up, let's take a break from 3D Zelda, which we'll come back to talk about 1D Zelda. Link is a line, Zelda is a line, everything's a line. Hyrule doesn't need saving because it's a line. Done. Now to 2D. Looking at the history of 2D Zelda games, in recent years, they've been quite few and far between. The most recent is the Link's Awakening remake by Grezzo in 2019, and prior to that was Triforce Heroes in 2015, preceded by A Link Between Worlds in 2013. So to some, it's been 10 years since a true new 2D Zelda adventure that they cared about playing. But as we look ahead in the world of 2D Zelda, there are more options than you might expect. So I'm going to go from the most reasonable to the least reasonable to me, but I think the degree to which I want them may be inverted. First option is another remake. Link's Awakening in 2019 was great, and Grezzo has been bringing old Zelda games to modern platforms for years now to great success. It would be entirely reasonable that the next 2D outing is a remake of the Oracle games, Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. It would probably just be an HD version of those 2D games. However, I'm inclined to think that they'd go with an art style that's different than the toy box aesthetic of Link's Awakening. Maybe something a little more akin to an extension of the art style from A Link Between Worlds, like somewhat cartoony, but not toy box, but HD. Otherwise, they could do the same thing, but rather than with the Oracle games, I think a remake of A Link to the Past would be unnecessary, but entirely possible. That game stands the test of time as it is, but I could see them want to bring it to a modern audience nevertheless. To me, the Oracle games feel likely, and I really enjoyed Oracle of Seasons as a kid, so I'll be excited to play it on Nintendo Switch Online in the coming months, but I do feel as though this 2D remake thing would be an effort that would be better used on some more exciting projects. I would much rather that time be put into a brand new 2D Zelda game. But in doing so, I will call attention to the fact that Aonuma said himself in interviews surrounding Tears of the Kingdom that Ocarina of Time did set a bit of a formula for Zelda, and Breath of the Wild seems to set a similar new precedent going forward. This was, of course, in regards to 3D Zeldas first and foremost, but looking at what was done with A Link Between Worlds, whereby it removed the completely linear progression that the series had become accustomed to, I wouldn't be surprised to see the heart of exploration and innovation make its way back to the 2D series. Specifically, I could envision the concepts from the GDC talk in 2017 around Breath of the Wild, where a 2D prototype was shown to have the basic concepts of the physics engine and the chemistry engine that the full game was eventually known and loved to feature. To me, a brand new game from this team could look like a more open-ended game, where temples themselves are more traditional and do reward you with items, but these items serve as the permanent structures to mechanics that could already be somewhat achieved environmentally, like a fire rod item from a temple, but throughout the game, without it, you could just make a makeshift torch and apply the logic of the chemistry engine to get through those puzzles without the rod, just with a bit more challenge. I honestly think that if we do see a new 2D Zelda, this kind of marrying of the two concepts, the innovation and the traditional, is moderately likely, and I would definitely love to see it. And the last 2D Zelda idea is actually another remake, but it's one that's been rattling around in the back of my brain for a couple of years, and one of our friends, Jake, aka The BitBloggist, actually brought up on an episode of the 11.5 Minutes podcast, linked below, a couple months ago. A remake of Zelda 2. This has always been the kind of odd one out of the Zelda franchise. It's an actual RPG with experience and everything, and you need to grind before it can become any kind of fun. There's essentially random encounters, and the 2D action is consistently side-scrolling, which is only ever really repeated in Link's Awakening, and very rarely at that. This is a weird game by Zelda standards. However, if this was not just remastered, but more like remade, kind of along the lines of the Final Fantasy VII remake, but still 2D for the game, where as many liberties can be taken as need to be, Link in Smash Bros. Is basically a souped-up version of the action in this game, and the action in this title isn't very good because games in the 1980s, by and large, just weren't very good, especially not at fast and frenetic sword combat. But it's especially evident to me how good and cinematic 2D sword action can be improved to be from its origins when looking at the original Prince of Persia compared to the new game, The Lost Crown. Similarly, Hollow Knight, Dead Cells, and tons more. And since it's an RPG where you level up your various abilities, I'd love that to be shown off even more fully with magic attacks looking cooler and stronger as they're leveled up. Make bosses epic as compared to their originals. For example, a Gleeok or Lynel from Zelda 1 versus one in Tears of the Kingdom. I'm not sure what the best approach would be for the overworld, but making that interesting would be an area to take as many creative freedoms as is necessary. I just think this is a game with a ton of untapped potential and would love to see that realized. Do I think it's likely? Nope. I just don't. But possible still, and would I like it? Absolutely. So outside of maybe porting DS and 3DS games back to Switch, that's about all of the 2D specific games that I think would be realistic. However, there's another category where even more could be on the table: Zelda spin-offs. Looking at what has come before could influence what comes next, but that doesn't necessarily mean it will. We've seen games such as Hyrule Warriors and then Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, some Tingle games, Link's Crossbow Training, the CDI games, and Cadence of Hyrule. This isn't really a series particularly known for its spin-offs, so it's hard to predict what might happen. And to that end, we know of several spin-offs that were pitched, but never made. The Sheik game, Heroes of Hyrule, Did You Know Gaming has great videos on those, but the point is, it's hard to predict spin-offs, so let's try. For one thing, I don't think it's likely we'll see another Hyrule Warriors, at least not for a while. Both games were plenty successful, for sure, but I'm not sure that they want to burn that concept out too quickly. Age of Calamity did a great job of biding time before Tears of the Kingdom, but I wouldn't want another anytime soon. Cadence of Hyrule is an interesting kind of spin-off though, because based on that, what all could be possible? So here's one that I'm gonna pitch because, well, I would like it. I want a Zelda RPG, turn-based and everything. It doesn't have to be a huge one. I'd be down for this to be the 2D adventure that comes, whatever. But let me have a party with Link, Zelda, and maybe rotating party members of Impa, a Goron, a Rito, a Zora, a Gerudo, or something. I've said a million times that I love Golden Sun, and it's basically a JRPG with the overworld mechanics of a 2D Zelda game. And if I'm not going to get a Golden Sun, although Sea of Stars does look pretty promising, and I do actually want a Golden Sun, then I'd absolutely love a turn-based Zelda RPG. Do I think it's likely? Frankly, as a spin-off, I think it's actually more likely than getting any of the already existing spin-off series again. So, no, but maybe. And of course, I'd love it. But otherwise, some kind of Zelda spin-off is certainly possible, and maybe even likely. Spinning off even further away from the main series games, although we'll be coming back to it soon, is the idea of Zelda movies or a TV show. Frankly, the most likely is and always has been an animated Illumination Zelda movie, the same studio behind the Mario movie, the Minions, Despicable Me, and tons more. While that's not the direction I'd prefer to go it in, I saw someone aptly point out that worrying about the studio's history isn't the most reliable thing to do, considering the two Spider-Verse movies and Mitchell's vs. the Machines are top-notch animated movies made by the same studio as the Emoji Movie, so there's certainly room to flex and stretch here. And I do think the end result will likely be a Zelda movie that feels less Pixar and a little more Spider-Verse, since it's essentially cel-shaded 3D graphics, and that's what Nintendo has liked for Zelda for a bit now. Other options? I would love a live-action Zelda movie, but I don't think this is likely. And frankly, I don't think it would be done as well as an animated one anyway, just because the budget to pull it off would be more than I think is reasonable. But my top pick would be an anime-style Zelda show or movie, preferably show. Think Castlevania or Princess Mononoke. In terms of likelihood though, a Zelda movie is basically 100% confirmed at this point, and basically 100% with Illumination. But could they still do a show on the side in the meantime? I'd hope so, but even so, I think the Illumination project will come in above our expectations in spite of the studio itself. So lastly, let's get back to the games, and back to things more related to Tears of the Kingdom. Is there a future for 3D Zelda? I mean, yeah, very definitely so. Aonuma suggested as much recently. The other thing we know is that it will fall roughly in the same structure as Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, in that it'll be an open-air game. But even that leaves a lot of questions. As I said, I haven't finished Tears of the Kingdom, but depending on how it ends, does it absolutely conclusively finish the story? If not, is it at all possible that there is just a third game in this series? My gut tells me no, but let's leave that on the table as one option. And if there is, then there's not much to say. A third game would further the narrative in a world in a similar kind of way that Tears of the Kingdom did to Breath of the Wild. Done. But again, I severely doubt this, so let's assume that's not the case. There are a couple of ways in which the next 3D Zelda game could pivot. Firstly, a simple one, the art style. I honestly don't know what the pivot is here, as I'm not an artist, but I think it's very likely that the next game will look different to these two. How? Yeah, I don't know. I was gonna make a guess, but I just don't have enough good thoughts here, so I don't know what I want it to be, nor what I think they do, and I don't want it to be like Unreal Engine 5 ultra-realistic situation. That just doesn't feel like a decision they'd make. So what about you? How do you think they'll handle the art style? The next one is actually a story and lore question. Where would the next game fit into the timeline? This timeline wasn't really solidified until Skyward Sword was coming out, at which point they positioned it right at the beginning, and then Breath of the Wild came out and they positioned it way at the end, with Tears of the Kingdom immediately following it. Maybe the end of this game contextualizes something even further, but I don't know what that leaves for us for the next game. So let's answer this and another question at the same time. What happens to the world in the next game? In my opinion, the next game should take place in another time and place that is as separate from the rest of the timeline as possible. Traditional Zelda concepts have been revisited and updated in so many ways in these two games that revisiting these races and these locations, even if the map itself is changed up, just wouldn't be quite as exhilarating. The template for this, in my opinion, is Majora's Mask or Link's Awakening. As you know from the first moments of the game, the whole world in Link's Awakening is a dream sequence, and that means that it barely has to mess with the timeline whatsoever, other than it taking place shortly after A Link to the Past. And similarly, in Termina, Link is in a weird place of doing not normal stuff and therefore just has a completely different adventure. I don't think that Link has to be in a mysterious place like a dream or a fantasy land to be able to accomplish this though. Link as a main character is just a powerful warrior guy who wants to help and save the world. I honestly think the most likely situation for the next game is a slightly different art style, and that Link winds up in a new land that is called upon his help, or he stumbles into, and needs to help save their world from their enemy who isn't Ganon, and who has nothing to do with the Triforce, and we get to meet new races, new enemies, and more. I think it'll be a smaller experience than Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, because those do feel like a once-in-a-lifetime magnum opus, but would still be a great game nevertheless. So to recap and talk all the way through what I think is actually likely for Zelda over the coming years now that Tears of the Kingdom has released. Let's see. Most likely is a Zelda movie, coming probably 2026 if I'd have to guess. Also very likely is Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD as a $70 double pack in early mid-2024 or maybe even holiday 2023 if Nintendo deems it necessary, though I kinda doubt it. A 2D Zelda game seems likely, but the first we'd see would be one from Grezzo, so this means that a remake is the most likely, probably of the Oracle games, maybe A Link to the Past. But I'd prefer it if they'd be able to be given supervision to take the reins on a brand new 2D Zelda game. In any case, I'd estimate that around late 2024. Furthermore, a spin-off developed by a third party seems somewhat likely, but I couldn't hazard a guess as to what it would be, so I'd put that in 2025, or any year that doesn't have another Zelda game. And then it would probably be 2027, maybe even 2028, until a new 3D Zelda game, which I think would be smaller scope than this one by a good bit and fit in the timeline in an ambiguous place, or right after Tears of the Kingdom. So that's what I think. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. And while you're down there, be sure to leave a like and subscribe and share this video with any friends of yours who are also wondering what's next for Zelda. Also, we've got a Patreon that we're shifting around, so feel free to check that out if you'd like to see what we're doing and want to help support. I spent a while making this video instead of playing Tears of the Kingdom, so you can feel about that however you'd like, but I'd like to go back to play Tears of the Kingdom now. So with that, peace and blessings.